Hi, everybody, and welcome to our new unit, the digestive system. In your textbook, it's titled Digestion and Nutrition. So it's a fairly big unit where we cover the structures and their functions of the digestive system, as well as some accessory organs, as well as some nutrients. That'll be a review of grade 9 or 10 health. And then some enzymes, which gets a little more biochemical near the end. So this is going to be chapter 14 in your textbooks. So any notes that I'm giving you can be supplemented with reading that chapter. And hopefully at this point you have your digestive tract notes that were posted um, in the files tab of our Microsoft team. So we'll continue here. The digestive tract functions to break down food into simple molecules that can be absorbed and used by cells of the body. So that's a lot for you to write down. I'll give you some time to do that. While you're copying that down, I'm going to just explain a little bit where it says the cells of the body. We're going to talk a lot about macroscopic digestion, where we talk about what you eat, but we'll also go microscopic where we talk about what those things that we eat get broken down to further and how they get absorbed by your body and get used by your body. So again, the function of the digestive system is to break down food into simple molecules that can be absorbed and used by cells of the body. And of course, since this is a video, you can pause it at any time to copy down any of the notes. The next note says there are two types of digestion that take place in the body. The first kind is mechanical digestion. So that's the blank there on your page. That's the physical breakdown of food into smaller particles by grinding and chewing to increase the surface area, which allows for a faster digestion of food nutrients. So that's mechanical digestion, where it's literally breaking things down from big chunks into smaller particles that can be absorbed. The second type of digestion is chemical digestion. That occurs obviously through chemical reactions from acids, bases, and these things called enzymes that are released into the digestive tract. So those are the two types, mechanical and chemical. You'll probably at some point be asked to describe the difference between the two. So where do each of these take place? That's a big question. I put a star beside that question and circle that star and highlight that circled star because it's going to be important down the road. You're going to need to know what areas of the digestive system go through mechanical or chemical digestion or both. So we'll start with a little video here where it's sort of an X-ray type video of food that gets digested first in your body.
In the digestive system, the mechanical action of teeth grinds food down into smaller particles, and the chemical and wetting action of saliva begins the breakdown of starches into more digestible sugars. The food is pushed through the esophagus into the stomach, where gastric acids and muscular churning continue the chemical and mechanical digestion of proteins in the food. In the duodenum, food continues to be digested by the action of other pancreatic and bile secretions. The digested food is absorbed by the body as it passes through the small intestine and moves through the large intestine and rectum.
So in short, we're going to cover that for the next few days this week, talking about where from the moment food enters your mouth, when you start chewing it up, and then you swallow it, and then it goes through a huge, long connective tube or series of tubes that are all connected through your body, and then eventually leave that long tube into the toilet. So we'll start at the mouth. The mouth contains the following digestive structures. There's the teeth, the tongue, the salivary glands, and then the hard and soft palates. So you know your teeth, you know your tongues. You usually don't identify your salivary glands, but we'll talk about that next. There are 3 pairs of those. And then if you feel your tongue against the top of your mouth, you'll feel the hard palate. That's harder. And then as you move your tongue backwards along the roof of your mouth, the hard palate will stop. And then you'll feel the soft palate. We usually do this in class. It's a really awkward thing where kids are, feeling their tongue against the top of their mouths, but it's pretty much the easiest way you can do that. And it's safer than putting your fingers in your mouth right now. So here's where your mouth is, and if hopefully you can see my cursor, but obviously your teeth are there. This is a weird image of a tongue that's been flipped up. You have your hard palate up here. That's more to the front of the mouth, and then posteriorly is the soft palate. And then that right there, that's the uvula. No surprise here, but teeth break apart and grind food to increase surface area for chemical digestion. So it breaks down, again, mechanical digestion. It breaks through mechanical digestion. It breaks down food into smaller particles that can be then further chemically digested. The tongue, you probably don't think about your tongue doing this job, but you're going to start thinking about it now. Its job is to position food on your molars, your back teeth, for chewing, and then also for mixing saliva with food. So your tongue isn't just there for taste, it's also there for physically moving food and positioning them onto the molars when you eat something. If you're eating something right now while I'm doing this lesson, try doing that. Try noticing what happens when you eat your food. Eventually, your tongue will move that food to your molars. Lastly, on this slide, when the food is soft, the tongue rolls it into a ball, and that's called a bolus or a bolus. And swallowing, what that does, it's basically your tongue pushing against the hard palate and then forcing food back. So again, one of those actions that you never really think about when you're chewing food, but eventually when you need to swallow, it's your tongue that pushes up against the roof of the mouth. Now you can swallow without pushing your tongue against the roof of your mouth, but it's really hard. Again, one of those awkward things where you can try to swallow without pushing your tongue against the roof of your mouth. Fun stuff happening here in biology. Okay, the next slide, still continuing with the mouth, salivary glands will secrete fluids into the mouth. Obviously, the fluid that salivary glands secrete out is called saliva. There are three pairs of salivary glands. They are the parotid, the submaxillary or submaxillary, and the sublingual. The parotid gland is in front of and below the opening of the ear. So what I usually do in class, what I'd like you to do now is take your index finger and don't put it into your ear, far into here, but point at your ear and then just go a little bit in front of your ear and then just go a little bit below the opening of the ear, sort of just above your jawbone. That's where the parotid gland is. And that's one of the major ones that secretes saliva into your mouth. It's the largest of the three, and it becomes enlarged during an attack of the mumps. The second is the submaxillary or submaxillary gland. That's lower than the parotid gland, and it's near the angle of the lower jaw, so just a bit lower there. If you're following your finger from the parotid gland farther down on your jaw. And then the last one is sublingual, and if you know root words, lingual, or if you speak Spanish, lengua, is tongue. So it's this salivary gland exists underneath the tongue. Since these secrete through ducts in the mouth and not directly into the bloodstream, they're called exocrine glands or exocrine glands. Doesn't really matter which way you pronounce it, but if we have time later this semester, we'll talk about the endocrine system, which is where there are things that are secreted directly into the bloodstream. The fact that these are not secreting any fluids into the bloodstream, but directly into the mouth, means that they're external to that, so they're exocrine or exocrine glands. So this next image is a diagram for the three salivary glands. The parotid is right here. That's the largest one, and you'll also see the parotid duct, which is a tube that carries saliva and then goes into your mouth. It's not surprising, just to let you know, if you are learning about this stuff, when you start thinking about salivary glands secreting fluids or saliva, your mouths will get more watery, and that's just that's all in your head. So the next one that we're going to highlight here is the sublingual. And you can see the sublingual is right here. It's this gland. My cursor is working properly. And it has all these little strings, it looks like, but those are all sublingual salivary gland ducts. So that's when you think about a lemon and you think about how sour it is and just how tart it is in your mouth. And then you feel saliva developing underneath your tongue. That's a sublingual salivary gland. Lastly, there's the submaxillary, also known as the submandibular salivary gland. It's sort of lower on your jaw there, and that's found right there. And you'll also see that one also has a duct here as well, which goes more to the front of the bottom of the mouth. The two next structures are the pharynx and the esophagus. These two we've talked about in the respiratory system previously, because they have just a commonality with the respiratory system. The pharynx, certainly. The esophagus lines up with the trachea. So the pharynx is also known as the throat, and that lies behind your mouth and below your soft palate. The lower part of the pharynx connects to two tubes. Those two tubes are the trachea, which we know about, and the esophagus. Again, this is where things are separated. Trachea only takes in air, and the esophagus only takes in food. And obviously, sometimes your esophagus does take in air, and then you later on will burp it out. But typically, those are separated for specific functions. During swallowing, while the soft palate closes off the opening to the nasal chamber, a flap of cartilaginous tissue is known as the epiglottis. That closes off the opening to the trachea. We covered this in our last unit on the respiratory system. But yeah, that's what happens. That's the epiglottis, so that you don't get any food particles down your trachea and into your lungs. So the one thing, again, this is a lot of surprises here for this unit. This temporarily stops breathing. So when you're swallowing, you actually stop breathing temporarily, and it prevents food from going down your trachea. So again, one weird thing to try, one of these sort of weird challenges, is to try to breathe in while you're swallowing. It's pretty much impossible to do, or you'll start choking. So don't actually swallow food, but just try to do the act of swallowing while breathing in. All right, we have another video here. This is kind of weird, so you can like skip ahead if you want to. It's nothing gory, there's no blood, but it is somebody who's on a table at a doctor's office, and there's a scope being done, and they're looking way down into the throat where you can observe both the trachea and the esophagus. So the person is lying with their head back, their chin is at the top of the screen, and their nose is just here. It's hard to see, but you can see that this tube that doesn't close up here is the trachea, and this one that's wide open right now is the esophagus. That one is very flexible, while we know that the trachea is very firm, except for the back of the trachea. The esophagus is the one that actually is very stretchy. It can expand based on the amount of food that you eat. And yeah, it's sort of just opening and closing. That's the esophagus right here. And up above it is the trachea. It's going wah, 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 wah. That's the esophagus. All right, so we'll continue on with the pharynx and the esophagus. The esophagus is a muscular tube that connects the pharynx to the stomach. So it's just a muscular tube, and you don't think it has muscle, but it actually does. It does a bunch of squeezing. We'll talk about that very soon. Inside the tube is a thick lining of slippery mucus, which helps food pass easily. The bolus, which we talked about previously, that's when your tongue creates food into a ball. The bolus moves down the esophagus by being pushed by muscular contractions. Those muscular contractions is that series of multiple muscular contractions is called peristalsis. I'm going to give you time for this one, or you can press pause. The forward movement of a ring of contraction along an organ, such as the esophagus, stomach, or intestine, followed by a wave of expansion that restores it to its original diameter. That's the definition of peristalsis. So it's moving food particles along the way and by squeezing itself, and then it relaxes afterwards. Another analogy for this is when you're squeezing a tube of toothpaste. That's like the muscular contraction, ring contraction of peristalsis. Lastly, we have a video here which shows again the pathway of food as it goes from your mouth into your pharynx and then into your esophagus and then drops into the stomach. This video focuses more on salivary juices, so I'll let you watch that, and then that'll be the end of our video.
The parotid glands contribute a serous fluid rich in amylase. Amylase is a digestive enzyme that begins carbohydrate digestion. The submandibular glands secrete a primarily serous fluid that also contains some mucus. Mucus secreted from the sublingual glands helps bind food together and acts as a lubricant during swallowing. As food is swallowed, it enters the esophagus and is moved downward by a wave-like muscular contraction called peristalsis. The contractions progress from the superior end of the esophagus to the gastroesophageal junction, where the contents of the esophagus empty into the cardiac region of the stomach.
Then the food goes bloop into the stomach. The one thing in that video that it talks about right at the junction of the esophagus and the stomach is a sphincter. That's a ring of muscle, like a valve almost, that opens and closes. We'll talk about sphincters quite a bit, but there's one between the esophagus and the stomach, and that's called the gastroesophageal sphincter. So gastric, anything gastric refers to the stomach, and esophageal deals with the esophagus. That's all for today. Thanks and take care, everybody.